Hello and welcome. In this short video, I'm going to talk about human factors. How does human factors influence safety behavior at work? A popular topic and an interesting topic when it comes to talking about health and safety. Let's dive in. And if you're new to the channel, of course, please subscribe and I can keep you updated of new videos when they're being posted. There's no point reinventing the wheel. There's a great definition in the HSC Guidance HSG 48, second edition, published 1999. Please do check the HSC website to see if there are any more recent publications, just in case. So in there's a definition, and human factors refers to the environmental, organizational, and job factors and human individual characteristics which influence behavior at work in a way that can affect, of course, health and safety. Quite a long sentence there, but fundamentally, it's all about how we behave, how we do things, and also including other things like factors like your environment, your job. When you look at human factors, of course, human failure, which we'll talk about in more detail as the slides progress, we need to look at accidents, and doom and gloom time. There are a number of various accidents here that we can talk about. I know the writing is fairly small on here, so I'll sort of take a little bit of a time to go through these very briefly. This is the 3 Mile Island disaster, nuclear disaster that happened in 1979. It talks about serious damage to the core of nuclear reactor. I think the key words that should jump out here are not only about the failures associated with the design of the control panel, there was distraction, alarms going on all over the place, and also maintenance failures. Then we have another one, which of course is the King's Cross fire, transport sector 1987 in the UK, and this was a fire at this underground station in London. And here you can see there was a discarded cigarette, there was also organizational changes and a number of things. I would suggest that if you do have the opportunities to pause the video, have a read through these, or better still, Google them if you're really interested in finding out some more sort of details. Clapham Junction always pops up when it comes to looking at health and safety sort of incidents and accidents. Transport sector again, 1988. 35 people died in this and 500 were injured. I remember this quite well because I happened to be around that area at the time. Fortunately not on that train. Here the immediate cause was a signal failure caused by a technician failing to isolate and remove a wire. So quite a couple of things, well, a number of things there. Space Shuttle Challenger, again a popular one. This was an explosion in 1986. Here the O-ring seal. This is the classic example of a confirmation bias, if you like. It talks about how this O-ring seal failed during the mission. Piper Alpha, offshore, 1988. 167 workers died in this one. Formal inquiry found a number of technical and organizational failures. Also talked about maintenance and also to do with, of course, permit to work systems. This is one that I tend to use quite often, especially when it comes to talking about incidents, fatalities, and it's a popular one also in NEBOSH courses when you consider human failures. The last one on this list for now is, of course, Chernobyl. There's, of course, a Netflix film on this if you want to find out some more details. 1,000 megawatt reactor exploded, causes a much debated but Soviet investigation team admitted deliberate, systematic, and numerous violations of safety procedures by operations. Okay, well, human failure and accidents. We know these things happen across the world. There's a number of things. You can go back in history all the way back to the 1950s, 60s, and earlier. There's a number of contributors here. But what exactly are human failures? We have to be very clear here when we talk about human failures. We can go down two sort of paths, if you like. The first path is, of course, where we talk about errors, human error. And these could be skill-based, where you're really saying that it could be a slip of an action or a lapse of memory. But people do make mistakes, and mistakes can be either rule-based mistakes or knowledge-based mistakes. If you're in industry, the one thing that, of course, that you should have a low tolerance for is where you have violations, rule breakings, and these could be routine, situational, or exceptional. And particular focus should be on this if there are violations, because that sort of is systemic of a failure in maybe a number of things, root causes like management failures, possibly also underlying causes. There's a lot to digest there in terms of what I've just offered as sentences, but fundamentally think of this. Human failure could be due to an error or it could be due to a violation. Now, spheres of influence, again, this is pulled straight out of HSG 48 because, well, you will probably have that as a reference, and I'm going to just talk through some of the fundamental pieces. And here we talked about 3 spheres of influence: the individual, the organization, and the job. So let's explore these a little bit further. In terms of organizational factors, of course, you can have safety culture as a contributor, commitment, leadership. You may not have the resources that are necessary in an organization, so the resources may not be available. Work patterns also affects the way we do things. Communication, we talk about this a lot, how we actually send the message across. Remember, we need someone who sends the message, someone who receives the message, etc. Supervision, get my teeth in. Supervision may also be an impact in terms of the level of supervision. Sometimes, not often, we get peer group pressure, and we may not, of course, have consultation and worker involvement. We may have a very good system set up. Training plays a key part, of course, when it comes to looking at organizational factors. So of those 3 spheres of influence, we've just explored organizational factors. Let's now consider another one to do with job factors. In terms of job factors, the task itself might be something that we need to consider. Remember, human failures could be an error or a violation. What is the task? Is the workload okay? What's the environment like? Are the displays and controls satisfactory? Are the procedures clear? Is it absolutely very distinct in terms of what needs to be done? So there's a number of job factors there. So we've talked about organizational factors, we've talked about job factors. The one that we should really sort of pay a little bit more attention to, I guess, is individual factors. When it comes to individuals, you, me, and everyone else around us, we all have a different level of competence. And that could be relative to the knowledge that we have, the ability, the training, and the experience. Now, we all have different levels of skills, of course, and our personality is very different. Some of us are gregarious, outgoing. Some of us could be introverted. Our attitude, well, that again is very different in us. Some of us may have an attitude which we may not particularly want at work, but we have to work with what we have. Motivation, of course, we're all motivated in different ways. You're motivated in a certain way, maybe to watch this video. Maybe you have a NEBOSH examination to do, or maybe it's just something that you have an interest in. The rewards can also be a key part in terms of how you're motivated. Motivation is a thing that is making a person do what they do. So if there's a reward and incentive, you'll have a different level of motivation. Of course, it could be positive or negative. Quite often you'll see motivation in many sort of slideshows or presentations or courses put as 2 things: intrinsic and extrinsic factors. Intrinsic are things that you are, well, the fire is within you to drive that motivation energy forward. Extrinsic could be external factors. So, for example, a reward or an incentive could be considered as an extrinsic motivation factor, whereas your intrinsic motivator perhaps for getting fit might be because you're about to do an Ironman challenge, I wish, or you might be doing a triathlon. So intrinsic, extrinsic motivational factors. Attitude. Let's talk about attitude a little bit more, because attitude is, of course, a ticket to success. Some people have some terrible attitude, and some people have got some great positive attitude. I don't know who you're surrounding yourself with, but I try and avoid people with a negative mental attitude simply because I find that they wear me down a little bit. So attitude is a person's point of view or a way of looking at something, how they think and feel about it. Now, this can be changed by a number of things, but be careful. You can't always change attitude. Education and training could be one of the components that could change attitude. There could be also high impact interventions, enforcement, consultation, involvement, and those are a selection. This one about enforcement, we have to be a bit careful because enforcement doesn't always result in an attitude change, if you like, for the better. There are occasions and studies done where, for example, if someone has a attitude or a violation of some sort, and maybe let's think of an example, you may be a prisoner and you think, well, we can do this through enforcement by putting people in prisons. There are studies now that show that this may not be the adjuster, if you like, in terms of attitudinal changes. So a few things there on how we can influence attitude, not necessarily always getting the results we want, but certainly will help towards changing attitude in a positive direction. Okay, perception of risk. We all have a different level of risk perception. Some of us are base jumpers, skydivers, etc. And we talk about that as a risk appetite, if you like. So risk perception is the way a person's brain interprets information sent to it by their senses. So that includes things like sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. So all of these will influence the way we see a particular risk. If you, for example, you see a hot fire or something that's hot, you feel the sensitivity as you get towards it, and you'll be always aware of the risk that poses. But factors can distort a perception of hazard and risk. And these factors are things like illness, stress, fatigue, drugs and alcohol, previous experiences, training and education, and the use of PPE. Now, one of the things to also consider in terms of factors, especially when it comes to health and safety, are workplace conditions, for example, high noise levels. Risk perception is a key part, especially when you think about human failures and how we perceive that risk to be. We may not always have the same idea in terms of risk perception because of our risk attitude. But certainly, if we base our perception on the five sort of senses, if you like, the sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, we should all relatively have a fairly stable baseline when it comes to the perception of risk. If you see a rhinoceros charging towards you, I'm sure that my risk perception of that will be almost the same as yours. Of course, let's not forget there is that fight, flight, or freeze that also comes in at that stage. Yes, I know lots and lots of content here when it comes to individual factors. We're all different at the end of the day. So in summary, on human factors, not reinvented the wheel. Let's go to HSG 48. 1999, pull that out. There's lots and lots of great literature out there now, books on behavior-based safety. The five videos that I've also got on this channel with Professor Scott Geller also talk about humanistic behavior, which is a good thing to watch. Scott Geller, of course, is one of the pioneers of behavior-based safety, and I'm proud to say someone that I've interviewed during the course of this YouTube journey. Don't forget also the three spheres of influence: individual, organizational, and job. So that's a short video on how human factors influence safety behavior at work. It is literally just a short video. Hope to do more in the future, so don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, and I'll update you as things develop. Thanks. If you're new to the channel, of course, please subscribe and I can update you with videos as I upload them. But if you've been here before, of course, I welcome your thoughts and comments, as of course all newcomers. It's always good to have continuous improvement when it comes to creating these videos. Thank you. Catch you on the next one.